Hello, Gerard Byrne from Volunteering North Queensland. Our session today is on submission writing, on acquittals and follow-up. It's very important, once you've been successful in the submission that you've presented, that you ultimately acquit the funding that you've received. Too often organisations will get the funding and they don't have a plan in place to manage that funding. It's very important that you're able to keep very good records, that you report regularly to the funding body as required, and finally, of course, that you sign off on the funding at the end of the grants period. Regular reviews. With regular reviews, ideally it should be monthly. Even though your funding might go over a 12-month period or longer, it's very important to keep track of expenditure as it happens. Experiences I've had is that sometimes people will overspend on the activity without good financial control, and then they've got to fund the overspend from their other activities. One way of getting around this is actually in your submission, put in part of your funding, if it's allowable under the criteria, to employ a clerk or a bookkeeper who can keep these records for you, that you've got a paid employee who actually does the work. So you've got a higher level of certainty that it'll be done and done on time. Speaking of time, one of the other issues in terms of doing a grant is actually lodging the final return on time. It doesn't build a good relationship for future submissions if you're tardy in completing the grant application. If you run into timing issues, please contact the funding body and ask for an extension. If you've underspent the grant, speak to the funding body and see whether they can do a variation, and maybe you can spend some of that funding to extend part of the activity you're involved in. So in summary, it's very important to keep good records, to report regularly, and last but not least, to report on time, so that you build up a good track record for the submissions and the grants that you've received.